All right, San Diego and Southern California, what's going on? This is hour one of Jon and Jim, final edition of the show in 2023. We're getting you ready for, as Brent just told you, San Diego State and Gonzaga tonight. Pregame coverage 5:30. Tip-off from the McCarthy Athletic Center, the Kennel, at 6 o'clock from Spokane. Ted Leitner on the call. You just heard him on the Darren Smith Show with Jack and Jonathan. Paul Garrison will get us ready from the East Village Times, covers the Aztecs. Will join us at 3:30. Ben Fadden talking Friars to recap 2023 from a Padres perspective. Look ahead to 2024. He will join us coming up at 4:30. I don't want to bury the lead. On the way home last night, I did buy a Pop-Tart for my son, Jones, who had never even heard of the concept of a Pop-Tart. He was basically, as I expected, blown away by the idea of it. I got s'mores.
Okay.
By the way, there was blueberry, there was s'mores. And I'm thinking to myself, do I really need to go fruit? They're both
fruit every day.
They're both not great for you. I mean, it's just like sugar. So I figured, let's just live a little, right? And let's just live a little. So I got him the s'mores. Now there were two in there, as you know.
Yeah.
I gave him one.
Yeah, that's probably
which was. I mean, it was like nighttime. He's 4 years old.
I was gonna say, if he doesn't eat sugar a lot, that's like giving him crack.
Exactly. So, but the truth is, I guess the bowl game strategy worked. Like, I'd love to see Pop-Tart sales yesterday because we watched the Pop-Tart Bowl. And then Brent and I, before the show, were just reacting to this like, hey, did you see what happened like post-game? Like, this was like kind of viral.
They ate the mascot.
Yeah, the biggest moment of the bowl season, I feel like, isn't Miller Moss throwing 6 touchdowns or the upcoming college football playoff games. It's the Pop-Tart. Like, the live mascot went into a large toaster after the game.
And he was very happy about it.
And then out came this edible toasted large Pop-Tart. This thing was like 6 feet long by 4 feet wide. And the winning team, which was Kansas State, just started like eating this.
The head coach
thing.
And the quarterback just started ripping it apart and eating it. It looked like something out of Day of the Dead.
Yeah, it was a horror movie by the end of it because all that was left was like this red Pop-Tart like filling, right? At the end of it, it was just like Pop-Tart blood everywhere. But anyway,
I'm really worried about the Tony the Tiger Bowl now.
Yeah, just saying. No, be careful.
Just saying.
I know. All right, so we're with you here for the next 2.5 hours, getting ready for San Diego State and Gonzaga. I want to start with this. There is one moment that stands above the rest, right, in 2023, if you're a San Diego sports fan. And we could talk about what else happened, because there was a lot, as happens every single year. But there's one moment that stands above the rest. And I honestly want to start with this as we take a look back at 2023 and turn the page to 2024. If anyone wants to weigh in on where they were when this moment happened, I'd love to hear from you. But first, let's take a listen back. You all know where I'm going here. There's one moment that stands above the rest from 2023.
On the drive against AG, puts it up. Short rebound, AG. AG got the rebound. Here are the Aztecs down 1, 4, 3. Lamont Butler. Pull-up jump shot. Good. They're storming the court. Who's going to the championship game? Not FAU. No. The San Diego State Aztecs are going to the NCAA championship game on Monday. How about them Aztecs? How about them boys?
Nothing compares to that in 2023, unless you're CBS Sports' Matt Norlander.
What about Ed? What's his name?
Ed Cooley getting hired from Providence by Georgetown. There was not a bigger sports moment in San Diego in 2023. I'd love to hear from San Diegans, sports fans today. Like, where were you? Because I guarantee a lot of people listening to us right now or watching us right now on YouTube remember vividly where they were. Maybe you were in Houston at the game. Maybe you're watching on TV. Maybe you were, who knows? Wherever you were, you probably remember where you were. It was a definable sports moment, one of the biggest in the history of the city. If you want to let us know where you were as we kind of look back in 2023, 877-767-4760. Again, our number is 877-767-4760. You can comment in the chat on YouTube. You can text us 70470. Start it with team. Paul Garrison, who's going to join us in 20 minutes, was literally to my left. We were courtside in Houston. He was covering it for the East Village Times, and he was literally the seat to my left. The seat to my right was Ted. And by the way, I thought about this today, Brent. I don't even know if I showed this to you. I think maybe you've seen it. There's a video that was recorded from behind me because I'm in the front row, and Lamont basically pulls up for like that, 15 to 17 footer from the right side, and he's right in front of Ted because that's where, we're press row. Ted's right there. Lamont's right there. I'm to the left of Ted. And there's video of me that I never posted anywhere because I'm like embarrassed by it.
Oh, when you're jumping all over the place.
Yeah, where I like freaked out. But my buddy John Fanta, who was the row behind me, had like video of it. He's like, you need to see this. And he sent it to me. And it's like very comical. But I mean, I literally like leapt out of my seat when the shot went in because what else was I supposed to do? And again, Paul was to my left. Ted, you just heard the call from Ted to my right. Brent was in the studio on the board for that moment. Do you remember what your reaction was, Brent? Because listening, you were ahead of TV, obviously.
We were like 10 seconds ahead. So we knew that it was going in. So
10 seconds early, yeah.
So we had the luxury of when it went in, to look at the TV and watch. So
were you shocked in that moment? Like everyone else was kind of shocked in that moment?
I remember Fletch was running all over the place and screaming, and I just
you're pretty measured.
I just couldn't believe he made it. So I was just pretty much waiting to see, what it actually looked like when it happened. But yeah, I just couldn't wait. And then it was one of those things where I did the same thing when the Cubs won the World Series. I kept waiting for like, I don't know, it's baseball. There's no flag. It's just like I'm just waiting for something to happen.
Right?
It's just like something's whistles. Something's gonna happen. They're gonna say that
0.0.
There's a balk or something. I was waiting for some sort of foul or no foul, and then when it finally happens, like, oh, we're going to the championship game.
Where were you? 877-767-4760, or you can text us 70470. Start your message with the word team. Again, 70470. You can start your message with the word team, because there's nothing in 2023 that rivals it. We can talk about what happened. I think there was, expectations for the Padres heading into the year, unrivaled expectations. Fan fest, tens of thousands, if not more than that, at Petco Park. The acquisitions that they made, the Xander Bogaerts signing, all of the hype, but then they didn't live up to it. And then at the end of the year, Juan Soto being traded to the Yankees is a pretty big kind of U-turn, I would say, to some extent, or at least a turn for the organization. And we're going to remember that for a long time. There was Sean Lewis getting hired, of course, by San Diego State this fall as well after Brady Hoke retired. But one moment really does stand out above the rest. Now, Brian Dutcher said this in the aftermath after Lamont made that shot. And he's so level-headed because he's seen so much. I mean, he had already coached in 3 Final Fours. Dutch did as an assistant at Michigan. It was 89, right? When they beat Seton Hall in Seattle at the Kingdome, and they won it on a foul call against Seton Hall in overtime, and they won it at the free throw line. I think it was 89.
It was 88 or 89.
And then there was the Fab Five in 91 and 92. Like, think about that, Brent. Brian Dutcher on the bench you win a national championship at a free throw line, I think with Ramil Robinson, okay, against Seton Hall at the Kingdome in the waning seconds. That's amazing. You lose a Final Four on a timeout.
Chris Webber timeout, yeah.
You have all of the remarkable run of just the Fab Five in general over those 2 years, specifically that freshman year. And then all these years later as a head coach, you get back to a Final Four. And then the way you get to a championship game is on Lamont's shot, one of the most definable epic shots in the history of the tournament, and certainly the Final Four. But what Dutch said in the immediate aftermath was, it'll be remembered a lot more if we win on Monday night. It'll always be remembered in San Diego because it's an amazing moment. And like Matt Norlander's list, it would have led the list, or maybe it would have been ahead of Ed Cooley on the list if that was
slow down.
If that was the national championship game. But it was an amazing moment. It was an amazing moment. And you think about the history of the city, and we had this conversation after March and April of the year, and there have been huge moments. There was 84 and 98, and the Chargers made a Super Bowl. But I mean, it's kind of right there, right? I mean, it's got to be right there with some of the biggest moments in San Diego sports history.
It's right up there with the Lakers winning the NBA in-season tournament.
Oh, yeah, exactly. If not bigger. You could even argue bigger. There's some text rolling in on this if you want to weigh in. Where were you? 70470, start it with team, or 877-767-4760 if you want to call. 619 saying he was at the Padres game, had it on the big screen. Stadium went nuts. Love Jared. Jared, thanks for chiming in. 401 at the Viejas Arena, or at Viejas for the watch party. When he hit the shot, I blacked out and ended up laying on the courtside ad radio desks after storming the court. That's pretty cool. Other people weighing in right now on YouTube. You can find us on YouTube, by the way, by searching for Jon Jim. Rich McGuire saying he was at Petco. JD Gaucho saying he was working actually at Domino's when it happened. Maria saying she was at a bar. So, I mean, everyone's got, it's one of those moments. I think for most San Diegans, you don't even have to be an Aztec fan. I think if you're a San Diegan, if you live in this city, you're probably going to remember where you were when that shot went in. And now, like, you look ahead to 2024, is anything going to live up to that? Maybe. That's the beauty of sports. I mean, we don't know. We don't know what the Aztecs are going to do, basketball and football. We don't know what the Padres are going to do when they take the field. But, man, it's going to be hard to top that. And I think heading into 2023, there was a lot of excitement and anticipation for the Padres. Like, hey, this team could win a World Series. With what they've done, with what they've added, with their payroll coming off an NLCS, like, it's a little bit of World Series or bust coming into the year, which means it was a bust because they went 82-80, and that was with, winning 17 of 19 or 20 of 22 at some point down the stretch. But, it's San Diego. We can't only have nice things. In fact, a lot of times we can't even have nice things. Even having the shot go in, I've heard from so many people over the last 8 or 9 months, like, just so thankful, like, that having gone through it all as a San Diego sports fan to kind of live through Lamont's shot. And so many Aztec basketball fans that have been here through all the ups and downs. But remember, before Steve Fisher and Brian Dutcher got here in 1999, the program, I mean, had never won an NCAA tournament game and hadn't had a winning team in forever, right? I mean, there had been some very good players, Tony Gwynn, right? Michael Cage. There had been some very good players, but from a team perspective, I mean, just a couple of teams that stood out above the rest, and they were down, just like kind of before Brady Hoke got here the first time. San Diego State football was super down. And then the last 25 years, like, Aztec fans were always hoping a team was going to make a run, and they had Kawhi and that team in 2011. And a lot of people believe that if not for, a Phantom T, and if they beat UConn in that Sweet 16 game in Anaheim, maybe San Diego State's the national champion in 2011, not the UConn Huskies. And then there's 2014 with another Sweet 16 trip to Anaheim. And then there's last year, and I don't even know what the expectations were heading into last year. I think it was to win a game. They hadn't won a game in the tournament under Brian Dutcher, and they found a way to beat Charleston, and then they rattled off 5 wins.
Well, pretty much last year was to win a game, because remember, there's that narrative that Dutch couldn't win in the tournament.
Yep.
And, he shattered that and threw that out the window. But, that whole narrative was going in there because of the last couple of years. So,
yeah, 100%. I mean, it was, can they win a game? And then they did. And then in the second round against Furman, not only did they win, they won big. And Charles Barkley was saying this is men against boys. And he was saying, look out, Alabama. And then I remember the week leading up to Alabama, when I was watching the press conferences with Alabama's head coach, Nate Oates, but really specifically with his players, when asked about San Diego State, what I recognize is nobody had any clue anything about San Diego State. They figured, well, we're in Louisville. We're the top seed in the tournament. We're going to roll through San Diego State. Who the hell is San Diego State? We're big, bad Alabama. And the Aztecs controlled a lot of that game, but all of a sudden, I want to say Alabama went on something like a 20-2 run. They went from down 9, Alabama, to up 9. San Diego State took a timeout. Darion Trammell went on a personal 8-0 run. Then San Diego State took a lead. They never relinquished it. And all of a sudden, they're in the Elite Eight against, guess who? Creighton, the team that had beaten them in the first round the year before, in really remarkable fashion, because the Aztecs had something like an 8 or 9 point lead inside of 3 minutes to play. And the lead evaporated, and they lost then in overtime. And then you get the ridiculousness of the way that game ended, which, by the way, sets us up for tonight, because San Diego State is playing Gonzaga tonight at 6 p.m. And two of the main, I don't even know what the word would be, protagonists from a movie perspective in that story were Darion Trammell and Ryan Nembhard. Nembhard, a guard for Creighton, Trammell, of course, for San Diego State. In the waning moments in a tie game, Darion Trammell drove the lane, put up a floater, got hit on the hip in the air, and a foul was called against Ryan Nembhard, who has since transferred to Gonzaga. The rest we know. Trammell hit 1 of 2, the second free throw, and Nembhard's had to live with that throughout the offseason. Was it a foul or not? Then there's the FAU game, and then there's the national championship game where the Aztecs did pull to within 5 with 5 minutes to play, but then UConn, to their credit, outplayed San Diego State down the stretch. So that to me is just like, I can go back to it real quick. Like, I can close my eyes and I can specifically remember each of those 6 games. Like, I really, really can. And that's my defining moment for 2023, and maybe other people see it as, I don't even know with the Padres, to be honest with you, like the defining moment of 2023 from a Padres perspective, disappointment, trading Juan Soto, the untimely passing of Peter Seidler.
Yeah, none of them are good.
None of them were good last year. You're exactly right. What was the best thing that came out of it? Blake Snell won a Cy Young. That's an amazing individual accomplishment.
But
Exactly.
he's leaving.
And then he's on the way out the door. You had really down years. You had Manny Machado, who's dealing with injury. You had Joe Musgrove and Yu Darvish dealing with injury. And you had a team that just never kicked it into any gear. Remember, Bob Melvin called him out essentially monthly for the first 4 months of the season, and none of it worked. When they finally got going, it was just way too late. And in fact, what happened late almost tells a different story than what the story was of the season.
Someone on the YouTube chat said the highlight of the Padres year was Fan Fest.
It honestly was. It honestly may have been. It might have been, Brent, when we went to hit golf balls in the offseason, whatever that is.
Oh, yeah, the links at the park.
Yeah, links at the park. I mean, not just we didn't know what was going to happen after 2 games, but when you lose your first 2 games of the year at home to the Rockies, it's not exactly the greatest omen when you lose 2 games to start the year to the worst team in the National League. And now they got going. I remember there was a time late in April when me and Jim were doing a wrap-up show. They won game 1 of a series against the Dodgers at home. It was the Kershaw meme game. They won the game. They put up the crying Kershaw meme. Like, talk about a bad idea. And not to say that anything is related to, I mean, who cares at the end of the day? But from that point on, think about that. From that point on in April, even with their September run, they were under 500. The rest of the year, they were under 500. So, I mean, some of the bigger moments, honestly, to your point, were all disappointing. The Kershaw meme thing didn't work out. The health of Machado and Musgrove, Peter Seidler's untimely passing, and then the trading of Juan Soto, which I would always say, like, actions are louder than words. You trade Juan Soto, you've changed not your trajectory necessarily, but you've changed your plans since you acquired him. I mean, you don't trade Juan Soto unless there's a need to do it. So clearly they felt as if they needed to do it. Why? Because their payroll is too high. And he's going to make 30-something million this year, and he's going to make 400-something million moving forward. And they didn't have either the 30 in the short term or the 400 to 500 in the long term. So we can pretend as if Michael King and these relievers and this pitching prospect Drew Thorpe are better than Juan Soto, or we can say it realistically, which is you trade Juan Soto and you're changing the trajectory of the San Diego Padres moving forward. Now, I don't know what it looks like. It is still sports. They can absolutely win without Juan Soto. It just feels like it's not going to be easier, I wouldn't think, to win without Juan Soto, but that'll play out coming this March 20th, by the way, which is 80 days away, something like that. The Padres will be in Korea. They'll probably leave for Korea in 75 days, something like that. It's coming. It'll be here before we know it.
When do pitchers and catchers report?
Well, for the Padres, by playing a week early, I would think that they actually report before other teams like the Dodgers would, since they play a week early. I mean, the second week of February, Brent, I would think maybe the day after the Super Bowl, which is what I think it was this past year, if not before then. So, that February 10 to 15 range, we're not far off. I mean, we really aren't far off. 40, 45 days away from that happening. But that's how I remember 2023. How do you guys? 70470, start it with team. You can call in 877-767-4760. You can comment in our live YouTube chat as well by searching for Jon and Jim 760 on YouTube. We've got a good show for you here over the next couple of hours. Again, Paul Garrison on the other side. He does a great job covering Aztecs men's basketball, Aztecs football, really all Aztec sports for the East Village Times. He's going to join us coming up in just a handful of minutes. At 4:30, I always say Paul's a great resource for Aztec fans. Ben Fadden's a great resource, and I think a lot of people see his content in one way or another. He's going to join us coming up at 4:30 with his takeaways from 2023 as well.
Oh, and did you see there was a Jim update that he actually...
Oh, Jim. I forgot about Jim. He's not here today.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
What's the update?
Well, he went to the, what do they call it, with the Christmas tree at Rockefeller Center.
He went to Rockefeller and he went to Times Square too.
Yeah, and he went to I want to say he was at like the Empire State Building.
Okay,
he posted some stuff on his
like
Facebook
50
story,
Rock
right?
or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. And
so he actually
raining.
did some New York stuff. It wasn't like yesterday when they're like he's gonna go eat at Symbaro's or something like that instead of going to do New York things.
Did I mention on air yesterday that when we texted back and forth, he's like, "Yeah, I don't really. It's cold and it's like dirty." I'm like, "Yeah, it's a city and it's the Northeast and it's
Coast,
December 29th." So yeah, I mean that's kind of how it works.
It's the East Coast. It's
exactly
always cold.
All right. On the other side, Paul Garrison will get us ready for tonight. His takeaways from the 2023 year for Aztecs football and men's basketball, being courtside for Lamont Butler shot. Paul Garrison, East Village Times, will join us next.
Here's what's trending from the iHeart Sports Network. The Lakers took down the Hornets last night, 133-112, behind 26 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks from Anthony Davis. The team is on the road to travel to Minnesota tomorrow to take on the Timberwolves. You can hear that game right here on San Diego Sports 760 with pregame starting at 4:45. College scoreboard update earlier today in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. It was Clemson over Kentucky, 38-35. In the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, it was Notre Dame all over Oregon State, 40-8. And with about 8 minutes to go in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, it's Memphis on top of Iowa State, 36-26. In NFL news, Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence will not play this week against the Panthers because of his sprained right AC joint, a shoulder injury he suffered in last week's loss at Tampa Bay. CJ Beathard will make his first start since the final game of the 2020 regular season when he was with the Niners. And it's finally here. The Aztecs will take on Gonzaga tonight on the road with pregame with John and Ben starting at 5:30, and Uncle Teddy will take over with the call and the tip around 6 o'clock. Here's what's trending from the iHeart Sports Network. The Lakers took down the Hornets last night, 133-112, behind 26 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks from Anthony Davis. The team is on the road to travel to Minnesota tomorrow to take on the Timberwolves. You can hear that game right here on San Diego Sports 760 with pregame starting at 4:45. College scoreboard update earlier today in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl. It was Clemson over Kentucky 38-35. In the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, it was Notre Dame all over Oregon State 40-8. And with about 8 minutes to go in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, it's Memphis on top of Iowa State 36-26. In NFL news, Jaguars quarterback Trevor Lawrence will not play this week against the Panthers because of his sprained right AC joint, a shoulder injury he suffered in last week's loss at Tampa Bay. CJ Beathard will make his first start since the final game of the 2020 regular season when he was with the Niners. And it's finally here. The Aztecs will take on Gonzaga tonight on the road with pregame with John and Ben starting at 5:30, and Uncle Teddy will take over with the call and the tip around 6 o'clock.
All right, you just heard it from Brent. 6 p.m. San Diego State Gonzaga, final non-conference tilt for the Aztecs. Really a huge game. I think nationally among the bigger games of the weekend, if not the biggest game. Big opportunities for both the Zags and the Aztecs here tonight in Spokane. Paul Garrison does a great job. I always tell you that. Covering San Diego State athletics for the East Village Times. He's back with us here on Jon and Jim. Paul, first of all, happy holidays, happy new year. And does anything come close for you, whether it be 2023 or just in your career, to covering last year's Final Four? I said in the opening block that when I think back to Lamont's shot, you're to my left, Ted's to my right. It goes in, and the rest is kind of a blur.
Well, happy holidays as well. Yeah, no, there's nothing close to that. And it was an amazing moment. Being able to hear Ted, give the call but not on the radio, but just, him going, good, it's good, it's good. And all the celebration, everything that happened. And then, right where we were at, all of the players, after they celebrated on the court, one of the parent sections was located right behind us. And so they kind of jumped off the court because, it's built up and into the stands. And then it was a great moment that, lasted obviously through a few days of just, kind of in disbelief that you witnessed that.
I always wondered, I mean, now we're kind of taking a trip down memory lane. I'm like, how are they going to respond on Monday? I mean, you're playing for a national championship game, but it's such an unbelievable high. I thought they handled it really well. I even remember watching some of the videos from like the locker room post game, and I wasn't there because I was on the air, and you probably were there. But like, I didn't feel as if that night they felt as if they won the national championship. Like, it felt like, hey, we have more to do. They didn't celebrate like they had just won anything, but they celebrated kind of like they were in disbelief. Like, how do you look back on that night?
I think that night, I think you said it very, very well. There was definitely a pivot from the court and the celebration of the shot and the fact that, they had come from behind and done what they did against an FAU team that is sensational. I mean, they outplayed them for so much of that game to build that big lead, and San Diego State to come roaring back, and then to win it in the fashion that they did. I think, they celebrated that moment, and then I thought they pivoted. And in the locker room, obviously Lamont was swamped, and I took the opportunity to go and talk to his teammates, talk about, even to some of the walk-ons, and just say, like, where are you guys at? And he's made that shot 100 times in practice. He's made it over me. The fact that he did that there is no surprise, and so just where they were at, I thought exactly what you said, that they pivoted really well. And their mind was, yes, that was great, but we need one more.
Paul Garrison, East Village Times, with us right now, and Jon and Jim. Forgive me, Paul, I forget. Were you in Louisville or not?
I was not.
Okay,
no.
you were not. But you fast forward to tonight, and you've got like the two lead characters from the finish of the Elite Eight, right? You got, and this has been talked about all summer. There was a WCC Mountain West Media Day this summer in Las Vegas, or this fall, and Ryan Nembhard was there. He fouled Darion Trammell. He played for Creighton at the time. He's now a transfer at Gonzaga. Is it a story at all tonight, that the fact that Darion Trammell went to the free throw line because he was fouled by Ryan Nembhard in the waning seconds against Creighton last year?
I think for Nembhard, it has to be. I mean, if you go and you're to have their season end the way that it did, and I think it was the right call. I mean, how often do we complain about the refs not having the courage in that moment? But I think that shot is, especially with the way Darion Trammell was playing, I think that shot's good if he doesn't push him on the waist, if that makes any sense. So it's either you push him on the waist and he gets the free throws, or he made that shot because he made a great move to get by him to begin with. So I think it's absolutely a story. I mean, I think one of the interesting aspects of this whole game tonight is, obviously it's a big game for Gonzaga, but they're at home. They're expected to win. They're the favorite. And for San Diego State, it's a great opportunity for them to, get back into the top 25, to do all of those things. But because of the moment you just mentioned, I think they're going to have the Bulldogs' full attention. I think Nembhard, as their leader, is going to want to be able to kind of make up for, what happened at Creighton. And obviously, with the history that he had at Creighton against SDSU, he knows, what he's in for tonight.
Yeah, it's an amazing history. I'm glad you mentioned that. Paul Garrison, East Village Times, with us right now, and Jon and Jim. He had the highs of 2 years ago in the NCAA tournament. Creighton, left for dead, wins a game that they should not have won, but to their credit, they found a way in the waning couple of minutes and then won it in overtime. And then last year, they lose a game with what we've just been describing here over the last minute or two. So he's, really keenly aware of San Diego State. But what do you make of where the Aztecs are tonight compared to a year ago heading into conference play? I'm trying to think back to a year ago. I don't think there was some definitive statement you could have made a year ago like, hey, San Diego State is primed for a run. We knew they were a veteran team. They weren't perfect at this point. They weren't even perfect in conference play. They played very well, though, in conference play in 2023. Like, how do they stack up right now compared to where they were a year ago, and what's still to come for this team?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I remember a year ago they had kind of a long break in around the holidays, just like they just got done having this year, and Coach Dutcher talked about that they did a lot of self scouting during that time, and I remember asking him, "So what did you learn from the self scout? After this whole thing?" And he said, "We're an elite defensive team." That's what he said last year. I asked him that same question after St. Catherine's, and he said, if we're going to be the team that we need to be able to rebound the basketball better. So I think that to answer the question, I think that last year it was about fine tuning, I think, what he saw and was there. And I think for this team, there's still a lot more growth that needs to happen in order for them to get close to the level of last year's team. And, great opportunity to do that tonight.
Yeah, 100%. And you talk about rebounding, and I think I read a preview earlier today at the East Village Times about how good Gonzaga is at rebounding the basketball. They're somewhere in that 98% threshold across, Division I basketball with their ability to rebound. I think San Diego State continues to improve in that area. Is that what it's going to come down to tonight? They got a great center in Graham Ike and other big men. They got 3 or 4 talented big men. San Diego State obviously has one of the best big men in the country in Jaden Ledee. Is this a game where you got to limit second chance opportunities and you got to be, close to even on the glass?
I think that it can go two ways. Yes, if they're even on the glass, I think that is a great recipe for success with San Diego State. I think the other really interesting part about that is if Gonzaga crashes the boards and sends people to the offensive glass, will that open up opportunities for San Diego State to run in transition? Gonzaga obviously wants to make this a track meet and play fast. But if the Aztecs can be selective on it, you can kind of even the offensive rebounding if you get easy baskets in transition that will kind of make them have to pause and get more players to get back. That's one way to kind of stop that. So I think it's a matter of, kind of picking your poison and picking your moments and your times to be able to get into transition. San Diego State's, they're not as fast as Gonzaga, but they want to play fast. They have the athletes to play fast. And so I think it's going to be, being able to have the game not be a track meet, but at the same time be very selective when the Aztecs do get out in transition, to make Gonzaga pay for sending too many people to the offensive glass. And then I think the flip side of it, the best offensive rebound, I guess you could say, is making baskets, right? And if San Diego State can shoot well and can score without needing the offensive glass as often as maybe they've had in times in the past, I think that also can, really help to get that score into the 70s and approaching 80 and really, being able to match the firepower that Gonzaga has.
Yeah, it's an interesting point because you wouldn't think that you try to outscore Gonzaga, but San Diego State offensively is a top 50 offense in the country. Gonzaga, though, is scoring 84 points per game. I feel as if San Diego State needs to keep this game in the 70s, not the 80s, but we'll see how it plays out tonight in Spokane at the Kennel. Paul, thank you again for all of your time for our listeners on Jon and Jim throughout 2023. Happy New Year, and let's do it again in 2024.
Looking forward to it. Happy New Year.
All right, Paul Garrison, East Village Times. Again, if you're an Aztec fan, make sure to find him on social media and find him at the East Village Times. All right, on the other side, much more as we look back at the biggest sports moments in San Diego in 2023. Plus, Ben Fadden, talking Friars. He will join us coming up at 4:30. Our pregame coverage for the Aztecs and the Zags will begin at 5:30 right here on San Diego Sports 760. Stay with us. All right, hey guys, it's Schaefer, and wanting to wish a happy new year to all of our listeners, our friends over at Windmill Farms as well. Saw Trevor and his family over at Viejas Arena recently for that Stanford game, actually last week. I've been telling you for weeks and weeks, months and months, it feels like throughout all of 2023 about our friends over at Windmill Farms because they literally have something for all of our listeners. During your work week, pick up your lunch over at Windmill Farms if you're anywhere near the college area. Why? It's affordable. They've got an amazing selection in their deli. Whatever you need, they have. With the sandwich card, your 8th sandwich is free. They use fresh, high-quality ingredients, and they really pride themselves on keeping their prices incredibly low. So if you have not been picking up your lunches over at Windmill Farms, you really should. And as you get ready for New Year's Eve and all your shopping needs, Windmill Farms has whatever you need, whether it's farm fresh produce and meats, your full drink selection. They have it for you. Craft beer, an amazing selection of craft beer. It really is an incredible selection. Kombucha, all the drinks you could possibly imagine. And again, the deli we've been telling you about, they're centrally located right in the college area. Family owned. Trevor and his family have been in the grocery business for 20 plus years, supporting local businesses here in San Diego like Harris Ranch, Mr. G Salsa, and more. You don't even have to live anywhere near San Diego State to take advantage of their offers and their offerings, because you can find Windmill Farms on Instacart. Have your groceries delivered directly to your doorstep. There is nothing simpler or easier than that. And they've got weekly specials for you as well at windmillfarmsmarket.com. Again, windmillfarmsmarket.com. Heading into 2024, support local businesses like Windmill Farms. Shop local. Shop at Windmill Farms. All right, the wrap coming up at 4. Ben Fadden talking Friars, friend of the show, 4:30. We're leading you up to the countdown to tip-off at 5:30, San Diego State and Gonzaga. If you're wondering, well, who has the best record in the nation since 2019-20? Like when you put your head on the pillow, Brent, are you thinking, man, I'm tired, Peanut's tired. But as I close my eyes, as I'm doing right now in studio, who's got the best record in the nation since 2019-20? I'm sure it's a question you've asked yourself routinely over the last few months.
I lose sleep over it.
So here are the best 3 records in America in men's basketball since 2019-20. Would you like to take a guess? I mean, you probably know where I'm going.
Well, I assume San Diego State will be in there.
Yeah,
That's
in the
why you're
top
bringing
3.
it up.
You're right.
Gonzaga will probably be in there too.
Correct. Any guess at the other program?
Is it a power school or is it mid-major?
Here's the hint. It's a non-power school that's actually in a power league now, but that's a little tricky. They just went into that league this year. And that would be
Not Wichita State or
No,
somebody.
it's a good guess. It's a very good guess. It's the Houston Cougars.
Oh, okay.
So Houston had been previously in the AAC. They're now in the Big 12. And I want to say right now in the metrics and the rankings, they're top 2 or 3. I mean, they always are. I mean, Kelvin Sampson's done an amazing job. Here are the top 3 records, okay? Gonzaga since 2019, 130-16, winning 89% of the time. Houston, 128-22, winning 85.3% of the time. San Diego State, listen to this. Since 2019, folks, they went 30-2 one of those years. They went to a national championship one of those years. 118-25 since 2019. 118-25, winning 82.5% of the time. 2 of those top 3 teams in the nation in terms of winning percentage, meeting tonight at 6 p.m. on San Diego Sports 760. Pretty cool. Here's the other thing that I saw earlier today, again, for Aztec fans. San Diego State is going to return 3 jerseys to its rafters at Viejas Arena January 17th.
Okay.
So currently it's Kawhi Leonard, and that went up during the 1920 season when they started 26-0 against Utah State. I think it was the night they got to 20-0.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember that? Everyone was wearing white. They
Mhm.
gave away a T-shirt, and they overcame a deficit. Matt Mitchell had a huge second half.
Oh, dude, there were so many celebrities in the house that night.
Who else was there?
Well, because remember, it was Kawhi had teammates that came. 'cause
Yeah.
Paul
Oh, you're right. The whole
George was-
Clippers were
yeah, 'cause
there.
Paul
Steve
George
Ballmer.
came, and yeah.
Yeah, and Doc Rivers was
Yeah.
there. Yeah, you're 100% right. So the jerseys that are going into the rafters that have been in previous buildings over the years, but never at Viejas Arena. Michael Cage, who was the first ever
Okay,
All-American.
center, yeah.
Okay, great player, obviously. Milton Phelps, you may not know the name. He played at San Diego State from 1938 to 1941.
Oh, okay, that's why.
And then you've got a women's basketball player, Judy Porter, who was a 4-time All-Western Collegiate. Yeah, All-WAC. No, WCAA selection. So Judy Porter, who lost her eligibility in 1983, so played from 80 to 83 with San Diego State. Her jersey is also going to go up into the rafters. She scored 2,300 points at San Diego State. Michael Cage, an amazing rebounder and scorer, nearly 2,000 points, well over 1,000 rebounds.
Had a great Jerry curl. I always remember that from the game.
Had that as well. And again, the other is Milton Phelps. So January 17th against Nevada, those jerseys will go into the rafters next to Kawhi Leonard's jersey, which is next to the Final Four banner that was raised earlier this year. So that'll be pretty cool coming up in just a couple of weeks against the Nevada Wolfpack. We've been talking throughout the course of the day. If you want to weigh in, you can text us 70470, start your message with team, about the biggest moments in sports in San Diego in 2023. And of course, our minds go to one spot before anything else, and that's Lamont Butler's shot against FAU. I remember thinking about it from a Padres perspective during the season. Like, what was the baseball moment that was the biggest of the year for the Padres? And there really weren't many. Remember, they didn't pick up an extra innings win until September. I think they were 0-10 or 0-11 or 0-12 at one point.
Yeah, because we thought they weren't going to do it for a while.
Yeah, I mean, they had a couple of moments late. Ha-Seong Kim early in the season had a walk-off. But, like, when you think about definable on-field Padres moments last year, I mean, what is it? Snell's dominance.
The meaningless series win against the Dodgers when Soto had that walk-off that ended up meaning nothing, but everyone was like, yeah.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, remember that was the series towards the end of the year where Soto hit a home run and everyone made a big deal out of it, but it pretty much meant nothing
because they
at
were
that
still,
point.
whatever. There was this faint hope. It was so faint. We were joking about it on Jon and Jim, and I was tweeting about it, where we were like looking at the Fangraphs playoff odds, and it went from like 0.1 to 0.6. And then it went from 0.6 to 1.1%. You're like, so you're saying there's a chance. They literally needed to go perfect in their final 20 games, and they came close. I mean, they finished 2 games out of a playoff spot with 82 wins. But I want to say even in closing, whatever it was, like 17-2 or 16-3, whatever it was, they still had heartbreaking losses in there. Like if you remember, there were a couple of games. I think they had bases loaded, nobody out at one point at home during that like 16-2 stretch where Trent Grisham didn't come through and others didn't come through, and like they needed to win that game. The defining moment for me of the season was how anti-clutch they were, because they had so many chances in close games, they just never capitalized. That's like the summary for me. They just didn't win close games, and hopefully they can buck that trend.
For me, it was just pretty much just the will they won't they game with Snell and Hader on, are they going to trade him or are they going to keep him? Are they going to trade him or are they going to keep him?
That Rangers series at home where they swept the Texas Rangers, who go on to win the World Series. And by sweeping the Rangers, did it change their thought process? If they were swept in that series, would they have traded one or both of those players? If they lost 2 of 3 in that series, would they have traded one or both of those players? But they swept the Rangers. They stood pat, and then they still ended up missing out with a terrible August in 2023. All right, on the other side, hour 2, pregame coverage for the Aztecs and the Zags at 5:30. Ben Fadden talking Friars will join us coming up at 4:30. Ben Fletcher will join us in studio again coming up at 5:30. But hour 2 of Jon and Jim, that comes your way next.
Here's what's trending from the iHeart Sports Network. The Aztecs take on Gonzaga tonight on the road with pregame with Jon and Ben starting at 5:30, and Uncle Teddy will take over with the tip around 6 o'clock. With the college bowl game scoreboard update, earlier today in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, it was Clemson over Kentucky 38-35. In the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, it was Notre Dame all over Oregon State 40-8. And now final in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, it was Memphis on top of Iowa State 36-26. In NFL news, Jags quarterback Trevor Lawrence will not play this Sunday against the Panthers because of his sprained right AC joint, an injury he suffered at last week's loss at Tampa Bay. CJ Beathard, who hasn't made a start since the final game of the 2020 regular season when he was with the Niners, will take his spot. Last night, the Lakers took down the Hornets 133-112 behind 26 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks from Anthony Davis. The team is on the road tomorrow to take on the Timberwolves. You can hear that game right here on San Diego Sports 760 with pregame starting at 4:45.
effects from tiredness, headache, pain, injections.
JD Gaucho, appreciate you, man. Really do. Guys, if you're here, thank you. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. With you until 5:30 here tonight. Jim will be back on Tuesday next week. JD Gaucho, thank you for the super. If you want to contribute with the super chat, support the channel, click the $ below the chat box. We get to super chats at breaks. He says he saw 2 game winners live in 2023, right? Mitchell at UCSB, 1.5 seconds at Hawaii to start the year. Ledee at the buzzer at UCSD to end it. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. It really is. The Ledee thing was really unbelievable at UCSD. I just didn't see it. I mean, the Aztecs came, storming back from 14 down in the final 5 or 6 minutes. Butler missed a jump shot with 5 seconds left. I didn't even think there'd be enough time for an offensive rebound. There was Ledee literally at the buzzer with 0.3 seconds left to put it back up and in to win and avoid what would have been obviously perceived as a bad loss for the Aztecs. So pretty cool. I'm sure many more to come. JD Gaucho in 2024. So again, appreciate the super chat. We'll be back momentarily. And thanks for your support of the channel. Really appreciate it. All right, San Diego and Southern California, what's going on? This is hour 2 of Jon and Jim with you tonight until 5:30. The countdown to tip-off for San Diego State and Gonzaga will begin then. Ted Leitner on the play-by-play call from the McCarthy Athletics Center in Spokane. He'll have to call coming up at 6 o'clock tonight. Yeah, we spent a good portion of yesterday's show talking about what Eric Grupner told Bryce Miller yesterday, and that was kind of what I was summarizing there. This idea that just be thankful, and we're completely paraphrasing, but it feels like if you read between the lines, and we'll talk to Ben Fadden talking Friars about this at 4:30, but like if you read between the lines of what Eric Grupner was saying, like just be thankful, Padres fans, we're spending more now than we've spent a lot during the history of the franchise. Where I think the other side to that coin is, well, Padres organization, just be thankful that Padres fans are supporting this franchise more than at any point in the history of the franchise. So it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg. I don't think one can do it without the other. So it kind of goes on parallel tracks, right? I mean, the Padres need its fan base, and the fan base need the Padres to continue to spend to be competitive. And we've seen, by the way, and we'll get to the wrap in a minute, you don't have to spend to win, but it helps. Now, last year, Arizona goes to the World Series with a bottom 10 payroll. Last year, Padres, Mets, Yankees missed out on the postseason with top 3 payrolls. I don't know if it's ever happened in baseball history since free agency. You have payrolls 1, 2, and 3 missing out on the postseason. You wouldn't expect it to happen anytime soon with 12 teams making the playoffs, but that's what happened last year. The reason I think it's hard for the Padres to win with a reduced payroll is that a lot of their payroll is taken up by just a few players. So where some teams can do it with a reduced payroll because they got guys on, rookie deals, so to speak, arbitration eligible players, but not free agent eligible players. It's harder with the Padres because they've locked up players to long-term deals and big deals. The Machado and the Bogarts and the Tatis type deals makes it hard potentially for the Padres to round out their roster because you think $200 million, you say, okay, it's a big number. But it's not as big of a number when you're giving one guy 30 and another guy 35 and another guy 28 and another guy 20. I'm talking about per year. And all of a sudden it adds up pretty quickly. It's like you might make a lot of money, but if you have an expensive mortgage, like you don't, yeah, okay. So you make $200K, but if you're spending $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month in your mortgage, right? You do the math on it, and yeah, $200,000 is a lot of money, but if you live in an expensive house, it's not the same as if you have $200,000 and you're paying $1,400 for rent. So I kind of equated a little bit to that. Padres have money, but it's been misspent, and can they find a way to finagle that spending where they can get more out of their money, right? Because that's what it is. It's like it's funny how money works, Brent. It's like people typically work within their or spend within their means. You make $30K, well, maybe you only spend $30K. But if you make $130K, well, all of a sudden you're spending $130K because you have a nicer house and you have a nicer car. You make $200K, you spend it too. So it's like, yeah, they got $200 million, but they've spent it. And you could argue the way in which they've spent it. And there's teams spending maybe half that, Arizona, maybe not half it, 60%. And you could argue they've spent it better. So that's a long way of saying we'll see if they can round out this roster. Yeah, it's still a large payroll, but it's coming down, and they've got a lot tied up in a very few number of players.
They need an accountant.
They need an accountant. They probably have one. I'm sure. I would think they do. If not, maybe they should post that job for 2024. All right, Ben Fadden will join us coming up at 4:30. And right now, let's get to this.
What's on the line tonight for the Aztecs against Gonzaga?
Good question. A lot is what I would say, but not everything, if that makes sense. I see it more as opportunity to gain and not a ton to be lost. Now, we'll see what the metrics have to say about that. But on the road against a team that's perfect at home, that wins like 95% of the time under Mark Few at home, historically, it's one of the tougher buildings in the country to win in, a lot like Viejas Arena. So I don't know if stealing one is the right way to look at it, but the Aztecs, I think you just said, are 7-point dogs right now.
Yeah, right now it's 7.
So it's a pretty big number. It's not a huge number, but it's a pretty big number. If you can win, you've done yourself a favor that pays dividends all the way through March. If you lose and keep it close, you haven't hurt your resume at all. If you happen to lose big, you've hurt your resume. There's no question about it. But if you could keep this thing within 10 points tonight, then you haven't really lost anything. And if you can find a way to win this game, you've gained a lot. So what's on the line? An opportunity to really strengthen a resume come March, I would say.
I almost want to say respect. Just because, there's an old, he's really old now, wrestler, Ric Flair used to always say, to be the man, you got to beat the man.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Go through
in
Gonzaga.
terms of the mid majors, Gonzaga is the man. They've been the man for years. And if San Diego State wants to be considered up there with Gonzaga, they have to go up there in their house and win, because the only way they're going to get the respect is if they go up there and win and they take it.
Yeah, no, I do. I agree with that. And we talked about it earlier in the week. It's like it's more in the line for Gonzaga because they're in a weaker league this year. They both have a lot to play for tonight. That's why I think it should be a really good game. Next question.
Are the Browns a legitimate Super Bowl contender?
The
Cleveland Browns.
Cleveland Brown. I mean, listen, Paul Charchian, our fantasy football insider, came on yesterday and said, listen, the Browns are going to beat the Jets by 3 scores tonight, and they're going to be considered a Super Bowl contender in the AFC. And he was right about them winning by 3 scores, but I don't buy it. I do not buy Joe Flacco leading the Cleveland Browns, who've got a very good defense and have somehow put it all together. I don't see a path where they're winning a postseason game on the road in the AFC. Like, I know Baltimore has been disappointing in the postseason under Lamar Jackson. They've lost to, like, the Chargers at home with Lamar Jackson. But is Baltimore going to lose at home to Cleveland with a chance to go to a Super Bowl? Is Cleveland even going to get to the AFC Championship game with Joe Flacco? I don't consider them a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And even in this 1 in a million, 1 in 1,000, they get to the first Super Bowl in franchise history, right? Because they never got there.
No.
Then I'm going to say there's no chance in hell they beat San Francisco, assuming San Francisco's there. So I just don't see it.
I had to laugh because I saw a meme this morning that is like the NFL's worst nightmare is the Browns in Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl.
Oh my gosh. But it's the Super Bowl. It's so different. Like baseball, basketball, you want like matchups.
Every sport's like the NFL is the same way, to where they don't do it as bad as the other sports, but if it's not LA versus New York, then they're not as happy as they should be.
Yeah,
granted, they're not as bad as the other sports. They don't harp on it as much.
I mean, the Browns in the Super Bowl is basically equitable to like hell freezing over, right? I mean, it just doesn't happen.
Well, that used to always be a thing for going to the bathroom, was got to take the Browns to the Super Bowl. I don't remember what movie that was from, but
next question.
Which 2 teams will meet for the college football national title game?
I'm going to go Alabama and Texas. So you got Alabama, Michigan in the Rose Bowl. Michigan has lost in the semis the last couple of years. This is not the matchup they wanted. They wanted Florida State, obviously. They would have been 25-point favorites. And then Texas against Washington, with Washington having to travel. I mean, the Pac-12 never played well in the postseason. They've rarely been in the playoff. It's been a great year, but they've won a lot of close games. I think it's Alabama and Texas, which would be a rematch of a Texas win in Tuscaloosa in week 2. And that game would be played. Where's the championship? Is it in Texas? Is it in Houston?
I am not sure.
Where is the college football national championship game 2024? Let's see. College football national championship 2024 is in Houston. So it'd be like a Texas home game if they make it there. So I think Alabama and Texas. What do you think?
I'm going to go Michigan, Texas.
Do you think Michigan?
I think Michigan, one, is going to want to make up for, getting embarrassed last year in the playoffs. And I think, as corny it's going to be, all the crap they went through with Harbaugh this year, I think the players are going to want to win it to kind of they're going to want to win it for Harbaugh, so they can just pretty much stick it to the rest of the country.
I mean, they have an amazing team. They've had an unbelievable year. They absolutely probably are as good as Alabama. It's just like, it's so hard to bet against Alabama. All they do is play big games year in and year out. It's hard to bet against Nick Saban. I'm thinking Alabama-Michigan's going to be a great game. I don't know if Texas-Washington will be a great game or not. I hope so.
I think that'll be like a 3-score game.
Let's get to the next question.
We talked about the biggest San Diego sports moment in 2023 was. What was the second biggest?
What do you guys think? 70470 started with team, or 877-767-4760. I mean, I think what resonated the most, there's 2 stories in my head. I think if you go to what resonated more, it's Soto's trade over Sean Lewis's hire. Those are the 2. Now, Peter Sadler's passing was a huge story. But, in terms of impact on an organization, that's huge too. But Soto's trade is significant. So is Sadler's passing. And then Sean Lewis's hire, of course, could be a significant hire for San Diego State football. So in my mind, I turn to Soto and Sean Lewis. It's kind of off-field stories. Like Lamont Butler's on court. The other ones are off-court, off-field for me.
For me, this would be I guess an honorable mention because it's not for me specifically, but it's for other people in the area.
Yeah.
The announcement of the MLS.
That was a big story. Yeah.
You know, it's for me personally,
good
it doesn't
point.
matter because I'm not a big soccer
That's good.
fan, but for
Yeah.
people around here that do like soccer, that was a big deal for them that with the announcement that they're going to get an MLS team.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. You know, in terms of, again, like what franchise resonates the most, you know, among the big four teams? Well, we have the Padres in those sports. So obviously that resonates. And what the Padres have done from a marketing perspective and bringing in all these big names, trading away Juan Soto is like a huge story. But you're right. I mean, Major League Soccer, which has been like a white whale for San Diego for 25 years, finally coming here. A lot of people didn't think that day was coming. There were all these, right, Soccer City and all these maneuverings over the years. And for it to be here, I mean, we're about a year away. I think it's like February of 2025. So you're like 14 months away from Major League Soccer at Snapdragon Stadium. I do think is a significant story. I don't know how it's going to resonate with San Diegans. And now I think professional soccer in San Diego is proven loyal, successful. NWSL with Alex Morgan and the Wave successful. I think Major League Soccer is going to be very successful. I don't
was
know
just trying to think of like
Padres or whatever.
Something that was somewhat positive for a story because, you know, obviously the passing of Peter Seidler was to me the second biggest story, but you know, it's not, you know, someone passing is never really a, you know, positive story or something like that. So it's not, for me, the MLS would just be something more positive that doesn't have any sort of, I don't want to say negative because that's not the right term, but just like it has a different tone to it that doesn't,
I agree.
a less somber tone.
No, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think the question with Major League Soccer is like, is it going to be, this is how I look at it. Is it either going to be successful or extremely successful? Like, I don't see how it falls flat in San Diego. I really don't. I think it's an amazing soccer market. I think it's been proven, and I think it can continue to prove itself. They have the right venue, yada, yada, yada. Now, I don't know if it's going to be, again, popular or extremely popular. And probably a lot of that is based on the way the organization goes about its business, like how they put a team together, how it's marketed, you know, price points, fan experience. But it's going to be successful. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, at what point does that anticipation ratchet up? We're probably still in front of it. I think to your point, Brent, the announcement, big deal, whenever that was this past summer. But then it's quieted down, right? Like we haven't spent a lot of time, October, November, December, for example, talking about it. But then again, what's there really to talk about? They don't have a team. I think they're building a training complex. Like there's not a lot to talk about right now. But I think like this time next year, 60 days before like their opener, I do think it's going to resonate. And I think it has a chance to be a pretty big story. That's a good call. I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really good. Is there anything else that we're missing? Again, if you're a soccer fan, the Wave, you know, like topped the standings in the NWSL and then lost in the postseason. I want to say in the semifinals at home. It was a big story locally. Again, I don't know what percentage of our audience that's resonating with. I just don't know. Is it 90% of our audience or 9% of our audience, more or less than that number? But I would say if it wasn't, let's put it this way, Brian. If the Aztecs lost to the College of Charleston in the first round, in the same way that they won, is in tie game, 3 minutes left, they blow the lead and they lose by 5 or whatever. You know, they don't finish the game. Charleston does. I'd say 2023 would have left a lot to be desired for San Diego sports fans. But the fact that not only did they win that game and then they went on this magical run, that goes a long way. Like it makes up for other things that were pretty disappointing at times outside of your MLS point, which is a really good one. I think what they did and with Lamont Butler, it makes up for anything else. Like you could have told me anything else happened this year, and I would take what happened with SDSU.
Well, yeah, because you know positives always outweigh negatives. You know, if you know the Cubs could get blown out by 20 runs, but if the Bears win that same day by 3 touchdowns against like the Packers or something, then you know that's fine. I can live with the Cubs getting blown out because the positives will outweigh the negatives.
Right.
So I think that's just the way it is in sports, just in general, to where you're going to focus on the team that's winning instead of dwelling on the team that didn't win, at least in the short term. In the long term, you might spend more time, you know, we do it from 3 to 6 complaining about stuff opposed to, you know, looking on the bright side. But yeah,
I also wonder, like, as we turn the calendar to 2024, is our final show, obviously, of 2023 with being a Friday. We're back January 2nd. It's like, what big we can't predict what's going to happen on field or on court, but like what big story could transpire in 2024 related to San Diego sports? You've got like the Midway site with like the sports arena site and what could transpire there in
Yeah, but we've been saying
2024. I
that
know for
for
years.
5 years,
And I
it
don't know
seems
what
like.
else. I mean, again, we've had, franchises introduced outside of the big four. There's a new arena going up in Oceanside for the Sockers that could bring other professional sports potentially to San Diego. So I don't know. There'll be something. I mean, there's always something.
You know, it's a sign that when they announced Top Golf was coming, we were like, yes.
Yeah, right. That was like a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, I remember last year, like the holiday shows, me and Jim did a few of those, and some of them were like taped out, some of them were live. I forget. We were like, man, 2024. And, I forget where we were going, or excuse me, 2023. And a lot of it was like, hey, Padres are coming off the National League Championship Series. Aztecs basketball is really good. Are we getting closer to Major League Soccer? I think there was some of that talk. And then again, Padres didn't meet expectations, and then the Aztecs exceeded expectations. That's where we were a year ago.
Another one, but it's not a positive story. Conference realignment.
Yeah, it's a great one. Oh, we talked a lot about that last winter.
A lot of conference realignment.
That's a great point.
That that was a big story. Whether it was all the Pac-12 schools jumping to the Big 12, whether it was is San Diego State going to go to the Pac-12, and so lots of conference realignment.
No, 100%. In fact, to the point, Brent, where I didn't mention this yesterday because it's like, man, you don't want to open up the wound or like cry over spilled milk, which I constantly do. But there was an article. I mean, you would find this really interesting. It was in the Seattle Times, and it was rehashing the final days of the Pac-12 conference. So it was like August. This August 4th is the day that the Pac-12 was supposed to meet and be like, hey, are we signing this deal or not? And that's when Oregon and Washington said, we're going to Big 10. And then the other schools went to the Big 12. Eventually, Stanford and Cal went to the ACC, and Oregon State and Washington State were kind of, quote unquote, left behind. But in literally the hours leading up to August 4th, this is detailed in text messages from the university presidents because of public records and also in emailing. In literally the hours leading up to August 4th, where they're going to vote, like as late as I want to say, when Colorado left the league and they went from 10 to 9, the Stanford president texted George Kliavkoff, where's Jim to say that name? And the Stanford president said, give my vote to San Diego State. And then the Seattle Times wrote, San Diego State was unanimous outside of a Cal. I forget what the word was. Cal didn't have a vote for whatever reason. They were like abstaining. Outside of a Cal abstaining vote, San Diego State was unanimous to join the Pac-12. And in the hours leading up to August 4th, even as late as the night before, a lot of the members of the league thought they were going to salvage the league like the night of August 3rd. And then it all transpired deep into the night. And, I don't even know who you fault. I mean, Oregon and Washington were looking out for their own best interest. Going to the Big Ten, it's hard to be critical of it. I get it. It's a big league, a lot of opportunities, a lot of money. But like one decision, like you were a day away from voting San Diego State into the Pac-12. Like a day away. I mean, there's text messages and emails, and the university president at Stanford saying, give my vote to San Diego State to replace Colorado. And you've got this 8-0 vote or whatever. And then it all unravels. But the one thing I do know about conference realignment is it never stops. In the history of the sport, it has never stopped. And there's so much change in college sports that is only accelerating heading into 2024. Let's talk to Ben Fadden, talking Friars about 2023 from a Padres perspective. Let's look ahead to 2024. He'll react to what Eric Grupner told Bryce Miller in the UT as well. He'll join us on the other side on Jon and Jim.
Here's what's trending from the Art Sports Network. The Lakers took down the Hornets last night, 133-112, behind 26 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks from Anthony Davis. The team is on the road to travel to Minnesota tomorrow to take on the Timberwolves. You can hear that game right here on San Diego Sports 760 with pregame starting at 4:45. College bowl game scoreboards. A college bowl game scoreboard update earlier today in the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl. It was Clemson over Kentucky 38-35. In the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, it was Notre Dame all over Oregon State 40-8. And it's now final. The AutoZone Liberty Bowl, it was Memphis on top of Iowa State 36-26. And coming up at 5 on the Coming up at 5, it's going to be the Cotton Bowl featuring Ohio State and Missouri. And tonight is the night the Aztecs take on Gonzaga. Pregame with John and Fletch starts at 5:30. Uncle Teddy will take over with a tip around 6.
The Beef. Thank you, man, for the very generous super chat. Happy New Year to you as well. Guys, if you're here, please subscribe. If you're here, you want to support, click the $sign below the chat box. We get to every super chat during our breaks. The Beef, loyal viewer, says, Happy New Year, boys. Thanks for all you've done over the year and hope 2024 is a great year for the Padres. 2024 wrap-up show, LFGSD, Jim's an idiot. That is a great super chat. That is a really good super chat. We're pumped, man, for 2024. I mean, me personally, I know I can say it. I can speak for Jim and say it as well. Whether it's Jon and Jim or the wrap-up show, we're just so thankful for everyone's support. Seriously, I mean, we can't do this without your support. I mean, it's as simple as that. Like, if you want more of Jon and Jim, please support our work in any way you can by sharing our content, letting people know, listen, stream it on the iHeartRadio app, view on YouTube, whatever you're able to do to support local content here in San Diego. Live local programming is greatly appreciated. So thank you, The Beef. Happy New Year to you as well. Thank you for your support of our channel and our work. And we'll be talking a lot more to you in 2024 and beyond. And hopefully 2024 is a really good year for the Padres and San Diego sports in general. But again, thank you for the super chat. Really do appreciate it. And we'll be back momentarily. Thanks, The Beef. Ben Fadden talking Friars, his reaction to Eric Rupner's comments in the UT this week, plus his biggest Padres moment from 2023 next.
Here's what's trending from the Art Sports Network. The Lakers took down the Hornets last night, 133-112, behind 26 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks from Anthony Davis. The team is on the road to travel to Minnesota tomorrow to take on the Timberwolves. You can hear that game right here on San Diego Sports 760 with pregame starting at 4:45. A college bowl game scoreboard update earlier today in the TaxSlayer Gator Bowl. It was Clemson over Kentucky 38-35. In the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, it was Notre Dame all over Oregon State 40-8. And it's now final. The AutoZone Liberty Bowl, it was Memphis on top of Iowa State 36-26. Coming up at 5, it's going to be the Cotton Bowl featuring Ohio State and Missouri. And tonight is the night the Aztecs take on Gonzaga. Pregame with John and Fletch starts at 5:30. Uncle Teddy will take over with a tip around 6.
All right, as Brent just said, countdown to tip-off about 60 minutes out. San Diego State Gonzaga coming up at 6 p.m. We're looking back at 2023, ahead to 2024. Always good to connect with Ben Fadden, Talking Friars. Great resource for Padres fans. If you are on social media, you have seen Ben's work. There's no question about it, whether it's on Twitter or Instagram or YouTube. As like I always say, great resource for Padres fans. Ben Fadden at Talking Friars. So, Ben, we appreciate you here on Jon and Jim as we wrap up 2023. But before we, look back and even look ahead, what did you make of Eric Rupner? I know you covered it and you've discussed it. What he told Bryce Miller in the UT, and to read between the lines, this idea of, hey, kind of be grateful for where we are with spending. It's been worse before, and we've locked up some really good players long term. What did you make of what he said?
Yeah, I thought, look, I understood what he was saying and what he was trying to get at. Like, be grateful for these superstars. If you woke up after, not being awake for 3 years or whatever the exact quote was, I understand it, but I think he could have worded it differently. He could have made his point a little bit different. And I think that's just not something that you say when your team didn't make the postseason, the most disappointing season in franchise history, and you have fans that are paying more money for season tickets while the team on paper seems to be getting worse. And Soto and Hader and Lugo and Waka and Martinez and Snell, all these guys aren't going to be on the team this next season. And you're saying, well, just be grateful. At least that's how it's coming off, at least according to a lot of Padres fans.
Yeah, and I agree. Again, I'm not overreacting to it, but I do think it's worthy of reaction. To your point, coming off a really disappointing season. Ben Fadden, Talking Friars, with us right now on Jon and Jim. This is kind of a two-part question. Let me start here. What was the biggest on-field Padres moment of 2023? On-field.
The best play would be Tatis probably robbing the home run, but biggest moment in terms of their season, maybe the Texas series. AJ Preller would say, yeah, us sweeping Texas, that didn't do anything, because there was a day after in Colorado, I believe, before the deadline. Like their plan was already in place. But when you sweep Texas like that, the fan base, I think we all knew, okay, there's no way that they're going to be selling at the deadline where they're at, because of how I think close they were to a playoff spot at that point, or at least how close they were to 500. So I would say that was really a big turning point, I guess, right there, where we knew that they weren't going to sell. And then things just got worse from there, really.
What was the biggest off-field moment of the year?
Oh, Peter Seidler passing away. No doubt about that, because now there's all these questions that go into this franchise. We haven't heard from Eric Kutsenda. All we know is a statement. That's all we've seen. We don't know really anything about him. And I've said this so many times already on my show since Peter Seidler's passing. And I think I said this to you when you came on my show. Peter, with him, we thought anything was possible. And because he looked at everything so optimistic, and we were in on all the big names. But now that's not the case. And I know that wasn't going to be the case with Peter here, but you just had a different feeling with Peter running things. And I think a lot of Padres fans don't have that feeling right now. So definitely that. But in terms of the roster, I mean, probably the trade of Juan Soto.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, I agree with you. It's a little bit of like, both are overly impactful. Seidler's passing, what it means for the organization, and then Juan Soto's trade, what it means for the Padres in 2024 and beyond. You mentioned Eric Kutsenda. I mean, typically we had heard from Padres ownership over the years to start spring training, right? Peter Seidler had spoken over the last few years. I mean, at some point we're going to hear from Eric Kutsenda, right?
We better. If it's at the start of spring training, great. I mean, I'm not in a rush to hear from him. I guess I'm just surprised. I thought that we would hear from him and maybe Eric Rupner at the same time during the Mike Schilt press conference that day after the press conference at some point, but I guess he wasn't there. I didn't see him there. I saw Eric Rupner was there. So yeah, I thought that maybe he would do an interview with an outlet, something, but we have not heard from him. I know that there's other owners that don't make their voice heard a lot. They're not like the Mark Cuban or the Jerry Jones of their sports, and I understand that, but to not hear at all, when he might just be the interim guy, who knows? But I think you still owe it to the fan base to at least, make your voice be heard, so fans can actually they can tell from your voice maybe how passionate you are about the Padres. But right now, all we can do is just question if this person is that, passionate about the Padres. No one's going to be as passionate as Peter Seidler was, by the way. So fans shouldn't expect that. But I mean, I think that a lot of fans want to hear from him for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Ben Fadden is with us right now, covers the Padres, talking Friars. You can find him on social media, on YouTube as well. Basically does it day in and day out, year round. All right, so we know they've been relatively quiet, obviously, this offseason. They've traded away Juan Soto. They've added pieces back in that deal as well. What are your expectations for the way in which they round out this roster? There's work to be done between now and the start of spring training in about 6 weeks.
I think that starting pitching wise, it's probably going to be via trade. I mean, we're seeing Lucas Giolito get 2 years, $38 million, a little over $38 million from the Boston Red Sox, and Jack Flaherty, how much money he got from the Detroit Tigers. It just feels like the Padres are not in a spot right now to give a big 1-year contract to a guy that may or may not pan out. So I could see via trade with the rotation. I could see one of the two spots, center field, left field, be via trade as well. And then the other go from free agency. But like center field, I think that's a huge question because I'm not so sure Jacob Marcy is ready to go for opening day. Tatis, he views himself as a right fielder. And there's not a lot of strong options there in center field. And Cody Bellinger doesn't make sense for this Padres team. So I'm very curious to see how the Padres end up filling that center field spot. Who's going to be in left? Are they going to bring in a first base power bat, DH bat? You would think that they will. How many of these guys are going to be lefties? I think that's something to look at for sure. But yeah, I would be surprised if there's going to be no more trades from AJ Preller this offseason. It just feels like with how much room they have to work with, or the lack thereof, the trade route is probably something that's going to happen here.
What's interesting is I think most Padres fans would tell you, and I think you would say the same. I mean, it's hard to say that the Padres roster in 2024, and we don't know entirely what it's going to look like, but it's hard to imagine that the roster, quote unquote, on paper is better than the 2023 roster. But that doesn't mean they can't win more than 82 games, which is how many games they won a year ago. How do you see, like in a best case scenario, what works out for the Padres to put them in a position where maybe they're not vying for a division, but they're vying for a playoff spot? What do they need to do to vie for a playoff spot?
Well, you need bounce back years or at least health. Because I think if Xander Bogaerts is healthy, then it's going to lead to a bounce back year. So you need Xander Bogaerts to be healthy. Fernando Tatis Jr., his health obviously is huge. He was healthy last year, but he did not play the entire season, obviously with the suspension. Bounce back years from Jake Cronenworth, assuming he's on the team. Manny Machado, same thing. So it's a lot of asking for bounce back seasons from these guys, but they have a track record of being able to perform, especially Tatis and Bogaerts and Manny Machado. Ha-Sung Kim continued to perform the way he did this past season. Luis Camposano continued to progress offensively, and health is a big thing in the rotation, especially now when the two veteran starters, that's it, Musgrove and Darvish, that is it. So, yeah, health is definitely going to be huge. But, yeah, like you said, they don't need to have all of these superstars to go win. They had it, and they didn't win. So there's the D-backs of the world. There are teams that have done this in the past for sure, that they have talent. I mean, look at the Texas Rangers. Jacob deGrom got hurt. Yep. Max Scherzer is not who he used to be. They have Corey Seager, Marcus Semien. Like, they have a couple big contracts, just like the Padres do. But there were some other guys that came up and were huge pieces to this Rangers team. Adolis Garcia and Evan Carter coming up big in the postseason. So it's going to have to be clutch performances and really guys bouncing back and guys being healthy. I mean, that's obviously big for any team, but especially with where the Padres sit right now.
Ben, before we go, I mean, it's hard not to compare yourself to others when you look, what's going on in Los Angeles and just the stories, lines that have run through, Padres, Dodgers baseball over the years. And of course, the 2022 postseason. Like, does it feel like the offseason has gone off worse because of what the Dodgers have done?
That's what it feels right now. And I think that them trading Juan Soto and them trading Scott Barlow and knowing that Hader and Snell are not going to be back, I think it all just makes it worse. If let's say Snell, Hader, they would have been back. I don't know if it's going to be as bad as it seems right now, just because, like I said, Soto, these big guys being subtracted, and the Dodgers are coming off of a division win, obviously, and now they're adding the two biggest Japanese superstars, the best player we've ever seen, this hype starting pitcher. By the way, acquiring Tyler Glass now as well.
Yep.
Like it seemed like they didn't need that help to just win the division. And the Padres, they're subtracting pieces from a team that didn't make the postseason. The Dodgers are adding really big pieces to a team that made the playoffs yet again in 2023.
Ben, great stuff. I mean, amazing perspective. You covered as closely as really anyone does. For our listeners, again, check them out, social media and YouTube. Search for Talking Friars. Ben, Happy New Year, man. We'll catch up much more in 2024. Thanks, dude.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Brent, for all you do, too.
Yeah, forget about Jim. I agree with you. All right, that was Ben Fadden, Talking Friars. We'll continue to look back on a year in San Diego sports on the other side. Plus, Ben Fletcher is going to join us in studio coming up at 5 p.m. as we get you ready for San Diego State and Gonzaga tonight with Ted Leitner on the call at 6. Stay with us here on Jon and Jim. Hey guys, it's Schaefer, and were you forced into a nosebleed mortgage rate in the past year? If you were, Loan Pronto is here to rescue you. Listen, if your mortgage rate is over 7, you're going to be in heaven with Loan Pronto's zero-cost refi. You can cut your house payment by hundreds of dollars and even do it with zero closing costs and no appraisal. Rates have plummeted to the lowest point in nearly a year. And it's time to say goodbye to that bad loan you got stuck with. Loan Pronto has APRs with fixed rates in the 5s. So don't live with that record high a day longer. You can lock in a lower rate now with virtually no paperwork or cost involved. Call now and see how much lower you can get your house payment. Refi now, and you can even skip your next 2 house payments altogether. Here's the number to call. You can call for a free 30-second quote. 30-second quote. 619-207-4336 or visit loanpronto.com. Again, the number to call, a 30-second quote. So easy. 619-207-4336. Again, write this down. Put it in your phone. 619-207-4336. Equal housing lender, NMLS 1661781, subject to lender approval. All right, John and Jim back with you without Jim. I don't really know what the daily update today is on Jim. Ben Fletcher is going to join us in studio. Then we'll have the countdown to tip off at 5:30. Yesterday, we became aware through a tip, which was Jim texting us, that he was in New York. He then posted on social media a photo of him in Times Square. And then he texted me. He's like, man, Times Square is like the worst. There's all these people. I'm like, yeah, it's Times Square. It's like the most visited block in the world.
Dude, that'd be like going to In-N-Out and complaining that there's tourists there. It's just the way it is.
I didn't know what Jim would think, to be honest, of New York. Jim's not overly impressed by anything. He's just Jim. I thought because of Aaron.
Well, he'd fit in New York then, because they're not very overly impressed with anything either.
I thought he'd really like it because I feel as if he likes anything that Aaron likes. So Aaron's from Jersey. They're going to New York for the day because my assumption is she wants to show him New York City, right? Hey, I'm from, the shadows of New York. Let's go tour New York. Let me show you all of its offerings, how cool of a city this is. So my hunch was, well, if you're going with Aaron's family and they're from Jersey, that you're probably going to like it. But again, he doesn't get overly impressed by much, which is somewhat like you. You don't get overly impressed by much either, do you?
No, not really.
You really don't. I feel like if you would have been at the Final Four last year and Lamont Butler hit that shot right in front of you, you would have been like,
I probably would have jumped around.
Yeah, you would have been like, that's
when
cool.
you're there with the group and everything.
Yeah, I agree.
I
with
probably
that.
would have got swept up
Yeah.
with it.
But again, the takeaway was from Jim. He thought it was cold and gray and slightly dirty. I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, what were you anticipating? It was never going to be 82, degrees out, and it's like a city of 10 million. So yeah, it's not going to be it's not like Galapagos Islands. It's not going to be pristine.
And it's funny because he talks about Times Square like it's Times Square in the 80s. Whatever, you get stabbed just walking down there.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like they cleaned it up.
I don't know what he's talking about. Anyway, Jim will be back next week. Next week, hard to believe, is 2024 again at 5 p.m. Fletch will join us in studio. I hate to do this to him, but I think I will anyway. I think we have to talk a little Niners with Fletch.
Oh, we did the day you're
the
Holiday Bowl.
Yeah, okay. What was his basic takeaway from?
Oh, he's not as bad. He's not as insufferable about it as Jim is.
Okay, so he's more realistic about it.
We can have an actual conversation about it with Fletch.
Right. Does Fletch think like he's thrown away his MVP candidacy?
No.
He thinks he could still win it.
He's not. Put it this way. Jim has Brock Purdy way up here, and Ben doesn't quite have him up high as the pedestal as Jim has him. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, anyway, Fletch will join us in studio. We'll talk a little bit about the second to last week of the NFL's regular season. Has anything changed in the Niners after Monday night? In general, their trajectory? He's already come in here. What are you doing? Are you coming on right now? No, he's not. He's just walking into the studio. So we'll talk a little bit about the NFL because we really haven't done that here today. And hard to believe that we're 2 weeks away from the postseason. Wildcard weekend is 2 weeks away, I think. January 14th or in that neighborhood. And heading towards the Super Bowl in early February in Las Vegas. I mean, even off Monday, real quick on that, we talked a little bit about it yesterday. I don't think it changes who's forecasted to get out of the NFC. I think it's still San Francisco. But I do think it's changed the forecast for who would be favored on a neutral field between the Niners and the Ravens. Not to say they can't beat them, but I think heading into last weekend, knowing everything we knew, people would tell you the Niners are the best team in the NFL. They'd be favored on a neutral field over Baltimore because they were something like a 5 or 6 point favorite over the Ravens at home. So maybe they would have been a 2 or 3 point favorite on a neutral field. Now that we saw what happened, and again, everything will change. It'll be if that happens again, but it's hard to imagine that San Francisco will be favored if and when they meet again.
Probably not, but it all depends on just, I guess, the lead into the game. You
True.
know, if Baltimore or the Niners are just, running roughshod on everyone through the playoffs where, they're winning by 3-4 scores, then, I think that's going to have a big impact opposed to if, they're squeaking by and winning each game by a field goal.
I mean, I think if you asked NFL fans, would they want to see it again? I think most would probably say yes. I don't think we saw near the best of San Francisco, but I think they're the best teams in the league. So the reason I say that, like Brent, to our earlier point, where Paul Charchin yesterday was like, hey, I think the Browns are a legitimate Super Bowl contender. And listen, in Cleveland, it would be the biggest thing that's ever happened. They've never played in a Super Bowl. But from like a national conversation perspective, Browns with Joe Flacco
Please no.
against San Francisco does not have near the appeal to me to round 2 of Baltimore and San Francisco. And there's probably other compelling matchups as well, but I think that if they do run through the postseason, and it's a big if, Baltimore's really struggled with Lamar Jackson in the postseason. San Francisco's got to prove it, obviously, with Brock Purdy as well in the postseason. He was hurt last year against Philadelphia. But if you got two teams in the Super Bowl that are playing well, San Francisco takes care of business at home. Baltimore takes care of business at home. I think more people would prefer that to, I don't know what the alternative would be, but maybe Philadelphia and Cleveland. Would you prefer Philadelphia and Baltimore than Baltimore and San Francisco as an NFL fan?
No, for me, if it's not my team, it doesn't really matter. I just want the better game. But I wouldn't be surprised if once the playoffs roll around, if KC gets their stuff together more, and then you're going to have to worry about them. And I'm not. It's not the same, but it kind of reminds me of some of those Shaq Kobe teams. Once they won the first title, they kind of would just sleepwalk through the regular season because they were just bored and they're waiting for the playoffs to start. And you can't really do that in the NFL because you'll get your head taken off. But to a certain degree, it's almost like the Chiefs have, it's, that old saying about, death, taxes, and Spurs in the playoffs. It's the same way with the Chiefs now in like the AFC title game and everything else, to where maybe they're just, we're still going to go to the playoffs. That's all that really matters.
And then we'll turn it on.
Yeah.
It's
or
a
at least they think
possibility.
they are. LeBron thought he could do that too, and he did. But
by the way, we're a little late on this. Spoiler alert: the Pistons lost last night.
Yeah, no, I asked J-Riff, I was like, dude, be honest. You were sweating bullets that the Celtics are going to get beat by the Pistons.
Was he?
You? He's like, yes. He said he was texting Frankie V because I guess Frankie V was at the game in Boston.
They outscored by 30 in the second half.
Well, in overtime too.
Was it overtime?
Yeah, they went into overtime.
I
forgot all about it. And then I was like, oh God, what's the Celtics score? And Siri's like, they're tied at 120, about to go into overtime. And I was like, no, they did. They blew it. You're right. They blew it.
We knew it. I mean, we called that. All right. On the other side, Ben Fletcher in studio. We'll get you ready for Aztecs and Zags coming up at 6 p.m. The countdown to tip off at 5:30. Hour 3, Jon and Jim next.
Here's what's trending from the iHeart Sports Network. Last night, the Lakers took down the Hornets 133-112 behind 26 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks from Anthony Davis. The team goes on the road tomorrow to take on the Timberwolves. You can hear that game right here on San Diego Sports 760 with pregame starting at 4:45 and the tip slightly after 7. And now a college bowl game update. Earlier today in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, it was Clemson over Kentucky 38-35. In the Tony the Tiger's Sun Bowl, it was Notre Dame all over Oregon State 40-8. In the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, Memphis topped Iowa State 36-26. And they are just minutes away from getting underway in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic with Ohio State and Missouri. And Ohio State standout wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. will not be playing in the game as he is sitting out to get ready for the NFL draft. And tonight is the night. It's finally here. The Aztecs are getting ready to take on Gonzaga tonight. Pregame with John and Fletch starts at 5:30. Uncle Teddy will take over with a tip around 6. Here's what's trending from the iHeart Sports Network. Last night, the Lakers took down the Hornets 133-112 behind 26 points, 8 boards, and 4 blocks from Anthony Davis. The team goes on the road tomorrow to take on the Timberwolves. You can hear that game right here on San Diego Sports 760 with pregame starting at 4:45 and the tip slightly after 7. Earlier today in the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl, it was Clemson over Kentucky 38-35. In the Tony the Tiger's Sun Bowl, it was Notre Dame all over Oregon State 40-8. In the AutoZone Liberty Bowl, Memphis topped Iowa State 36-26, and they are just minutes away from getting underway in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic with Ohio State and Missouri. And Ohio State standout wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. will not be playing in the game as he is sitting out to get ready for the NFL Draft. And tonight is the night. It's finally here. The Aztecs are getting ready to take on Gonzaga tonight. Pregame with John and Fletch starts at 5:30. Uncle Teddy will take over with the tip around 6.
Getting you all set for that drive home. Let's just start the show. Here's Jon and Jim.
All right, San Diego and Southern California, what's going on? Final 30 minutes of Jon and Jim for the year. Without Jim, countdown to tip-off will begin at 5:30. We do have Ben Fletcher, Big Rich, TD, and Fletch in studio. Now, he's not typically on this side of the studio. If you're watching on YouTube, you can't see him, but trust me, he is here. It is almost New Year's. You are now over a year of Big Rich, TD, and Fletch, right? About 15 months, September of 2022.
Something like it. Was the studio okay today? We made a mess this morning.
I think
All
so.
right, cool. You didn't
Jack
even know.
was in here. No, I see some like New Year's caps.
Well,
What happened this morning?
We popped off a confetti cannon, and there were drinks everywhere. I actually don't partake on game days. Make sure I keep it steady.
Look at you, man.
Yeah, some of us have responsibilities, you know.
Some.
Rich and Travis are in here just shotgunning, going crazy, but it was a lot of fun. We had a producer Shelly from 94.1 in today making some drinks for the holiday celebrations, and we had a great time. But yeah, we did pop off a confetti cannon. Big Rich twerked on the wall, just normal stuff.
Just normal. So what was we've been talking about like the highlight of 2023. What was the 2023 Big Rich, TD, and Fletch show highlight?
I tell you, St. Patrick's Day was pretty good. That was right in the middle of all of the March
tournament?
Madness craziness. Yeah. Right. So St.
That's
Patrick's Day was insanity. I think Travis fell asleep for like 3.5 hours after the show in not our office. But it's been a lot of fun doing that show with those guys.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, obviously the best bracket ever going viral.
I want to talk about that.
4.7 million views.
Is that what it's at?
That's what it's at. And actually, it keeps you know where it goes viral again and again is on Reddit.
And then
Which-
it pops up and gets more views.
Once a month at least, John, I'll get somebody, one of my friends from college sends me a
Look at
text
this.
with a link and is like, hey, is this you? And I was like, yeah,
Yes,
I mean,
it-
I gained some weight since college. It's okay.
The issue, okay, best bracket ever. If you haven't seen this thing on TikTok, find it, right? Big Rich, TD, and Fletch on social media. You can find it because you have to have it pinned on TikTok, right? So
Right
find
at the
it
top.
with Big Rich, TD, and Fletch. But here's my question for it. And the thing is unbelievably comical and like topical. And that's why it resonated so well because it's just hilarious. Do you do it again in 2024?
So people
Everyone
have
asks
asked.
that.
The answer is no. We're not going to do the exact same thing over again. Now, are there variations we can throw at it? Yeah, we talked about doing a Halloween bracket. We're not going to. It's you can't make it better though. It's like they're making
I
a new
know.
Axel Foley movie, The Beverly Hills Cop. They're making a new one, and I'm like, is it
Yeah,
going to
but
be?
there's money in it.
Is it going to be better? There's no. I didn't get paid for the best bracket ever,
No,
unfortunately.
but I'm saying like there's a reason they do these, prequels, sequels, whatever,
Someone
right?
wants to throw some cash at me. I'll do any bracket you want me to do.
I think best bracket ever has staying power. Now again, I don't know if you can top it. Maybe you had 16. You had 16. Maybe you go to 32 or 64.
Maybe. And the thing we found out about the internet that time is it was
Yeah.
so clouded by horniness that I think if we
Yeah.
change it to make it a little less horny, we'll actually get better results.
You think so?
I think
But
so.
You reach 4.7 million people. If it ain't broke, don't fix
But by
it.
the time we got to like the final four, I think people were
Right.
just seeing it and saying, oh, this is
Oh,
just
yeah.
total bro humor.
I always just go back to the first video.
The first video is the good one.
Is the one you need to see. Okay, there's a lot to get into. We'll talk San Diego State Gonzaga. We're an hour out. Ted Leitner's going to be on the call. Our official pregame coverage is going to begin at 5:30. Final show, obviously, of the year for 2023. We've been talking about where you were for Lamont Butler's shot. You were here, right?
Yeah, Brent and I were going
He was
crazy
saying
in the
you were
studio.
running around like a crazy person.
I may have taken my shirt off. I don't know.
No, you didn't go that far.
Not this year. Maybe
now,
coming up.
Now, were you with Brent where you heard it before it happened because you heard Ted's call before you saw it on TV?
I know for a fact I was in there because the TVs out in the news pit, they oftentimes they're a little glitchy and can get clouded. So I was in here watching the game and listening to Uncle Ted. And when he said it went in, we had to pause for a second and make sure timing was all right and everything.
Right.
Because on the radio, you don't get the full picture. And then 35 seconds later, when we saw it winning on the TV, that's when I ran out into the newsroom, was running around. I think Mike Usher was out there, some other people. But yeah, I was right here in the iHeart studios.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, like, I think a lot of San Diego sports fans will remember for forever because it was just one of those things you never expect it to happen.
And then right afterwards, when we got out of here, I went over to McGregor's Bar and Grill,
Oh,
which
that must
is
have been unbelievable.
just down the street
Yeah.
from my condo. And the amount of Aztecs fans who were there,
That's a great Aztec
who
bar.
45 to an hour, because we did an extended
Yeah,
post game.
oh, yeah, that must have been 90 minutes later.
Right. So 90 minutes later or so, I get to McGregor's and the Aztecs fans are still going crazy. As soon as I get there, this guy, J Pobs, who listens to the morning show religiously, I don't know if he's with you guys,
Yeah.
but he immediately hands me a shot and I was like, J Pobs, you're here. And so it was such a fun, magical night. And I hope we get more of that this year. Maybe starting tonight. Who knows?
Man, yeah. So tonight, and I've been saying it over the last couple of days, like, of course it's big. It's San Diego State and Gonzaga, two of the three winningest teams in the nation since 2019, two teams that have appeared in national championship games since 2017, Gonzaga twice in a title game, San Diego State once, obviously, last year. It doesn't really get much better when it comes to quote-unquote non-power, which is a stupid way to look at it, but you know what I mean? Teams that have broken through over the last 25 years, those teams are on two fingers, San Diego State and Gonzaga, and they meet here tonight in Spokane. They'll meet again next year, and it's just a great opportunity, really, for both of these teams tonight.
And I love the shift of power in college basketball that we've seen because for so long it was the Blue Bloods, it was Kentucky, it was Duke, it was North Carolina. And while all those teams are still there, all of a sudden there's these two teams out in the West that people are starting to take really seriously. And Travis Dale brought up this morning the notion of the big dog. And I kind of had to correct him. I'd be like, Travis, these are the big dogs.
Mhm.
These are two of them right here. Because you look around college basketball and the national writers who I follow, the Andy Katz, the John Rothsteins, well, they put out their little lists of games to watch for the week.
Yeah.
This is at the top of both of those lists. So when you start getting a little deeper into the weeds on this, San Diego State Gonzaga is going to be one of the highlight marquee games of the year. Will it live up to that? We have no idea. One of these teams could blow the other one out. Either way, we don't really know. Gonzaga's had a little bit of a down year. I'd say San Diego State has been about what we expected, if not a little bit better. So when you look at this game tonight, I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I know going in, this is a marquee matchup, light up the billboards.
Yeah, and it's one of these things that's becoming like a bit of a rarity where you'll get some neutral court games with high-profile programs, but to get a a program of the caliber of Gonzaga on your home floor, which is what San Diego State's going to get next year. Like, this isn't some one-off, let's play a game in Seattle in 2023. Let's play a game in Los Angeles or Phoenix in 2024. No, it's on campus. The Kennel McCarthy Athletic Center tonight, one of the tough buildings in the country. They win 90+% of the time. And then Viejas Arena, where San Diego State wins 90+% of the time. I like that because you don't see a lot of it. Over the years, San Diego State's hosted Kansas and Arizona and others, but it feels like that's becoming more and more of a rarity in college basketball. So I feel like it's good for the sport to get something like this.
And I also give credit to Dutch and I give credit to Mark Few, as much as I would hate to do so, because these are games they don't have to schedule. These are games that scheduling a couple years in advance, and you look at it, and this could end up actually hurting one of these programs. But I don't think it will here tonight, because both these programs are in good standing metrically. But that is a little bit of credit to them for taking on a game that's this tough in the non-conference schedule, especially right before conference play begins. I was talking to Jack Cronin out in the news pit before I came in here with you, and I said, could you even ask for a better measuring stick for both of these programs going into this game tonight, right before conference play begins? Because this will tell you where the Aztecs stack up nationally, because you are going against the best of the best. So when you think about who you're going to be facing in March or the types of teams you'll be facing in March, this is it.
Final non-conference game of the season for San Diego State coming up in less than 1 hour. San Diego State and Gonzaga. Ben Fletcher here in studio. Jim, we don't know where. I think New Jersey. He's with Aaron. Aaron's family's in South Jersey. He was in New York City yesterday. Took a photo of himself in Times Square. He told me it was cold.
Why did I think they were Philly people?
What famous New York food is he eating right now that he's going to come back on Tuesday and tell us is overrated?
Pizza.
Yeah, I think it was Italian.
Bagels.
I think he ate Italian, but he was all into it. Last year when he was there, he was all into, the bagels are amazing. Like, okay, we get it. Anyway, Jim will be back next
How
week.
different can a bagel be?
It's Jim.
People on the East Coast will argue all day about that. They claim there's something in the water. That's why the pizza crust and the bagels taste
And
better.
Jim has been claiming that, even though he's been to the East Coast once in his life. Okay, if Jim was here, I'd ask him for his Niners take, and he would go off on some 12-minute soliloquy. Since you're basically Jim when it comes to Niners.
Whoa.
I know that's not very nice to say.
Jim simultaneously hates his team and loves his team.
He is the worst fan.
I like to think I'm a normal
You're
fan.
a better fan.
Have you ever left a Niners game at halftime
Did
to go
you
watch
leave
Avatar?
The NFC title game last year?
No, I wanted to.
I know, that was a
but
really bad
I
game.
stayed and let the entire thing torture me.
What's your takeaway here?
Don't think it's that big of a deal. You're talking about the Ravens game,
Yeah,
obviously.
just where they are, but Monday night.
Okay, Monday night. The headline story coming out of it, of course, was the 4 interceptions by Brock Purdy. He leaves with a stinger injury. Maybe that was to protect him a little bit more mentally than it was for the actual injury itself. What I saw on the field was, if the first drive where Brock Purdy got picked off throwing to Deebo Samuel in the end zone, if that decision is made a little bit differently, and he either goes to McCaffrey in the flat, who was open, who probably would have walked in for a touchdown, or if he even just throws an incompletion there, that game is completely different. What we know about the 49ers is they are built to lead, and if they can get out early and score early and even just get a 7-point lead on a team, it's really tough for the other team to come back. What we also know about the Baltimore Ravens is, in Lamar Jackson's career, he is now 20-1 against the NFC.
Yeah, it's amazing. I saw that.
It's an incredible stat, but it just goes to show you that the Baltimore Ravens, teams don't match up well against them outside of their conference. Like, because you also look at the Ravens and realize, well, they lost to the Browns this year when Deshaun Watson was the quarterback. They lost to the Colts this year with their rotating door of quarterbacks. So I just think Lamar Jackson is a really tough matchup the first time you see him. And that's going to hold true forever, because there's nobody else in the world that's like him. So I don't put a ton of stock into it. And now if they meet again, I'll feel nervous about it, because it's a bad matchup organizationally for the two teams to play against each other, because the Niners know for the most part they're never going to have to play anyone who even resembles Lamar Jackson.
100%. He is a real unicorn, and he was special the other night. I'm with you. I don't think it means that San Francisco can't beat the Ravens if they play again. I will say this about Baltimore. The most incredible stat for me about Baltimore is not just that 20-1 stat for Jackson against the NFC. It's the fact that they've led every game this year with 2 minutes to play. I mean, that's hard to do. Now, they've lost 3 times, so they're not invincible, but they've led every single game they've played this year with 2 minutes to play in the fourth quarter. That's incredible to me. Now, they've been bad in the postseason. Lamar Jackson has a bad postseason resume.
Really bad.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just the extra emphasis the coaches can have on game planning. I don't know what exactly it is, or if it's just clutch time performing. Things go differently in the postseason. But what I do know is, I don't know that the Ravens are making it to the Super Bowl.
No, you can't
say.
No,
I think they probably
easier.
get knocked off earlier on in the postseason because teams in the AFC are used to seeing Lamar Jackson.
And it feels easier for me, and we'll see if this is true or not. It feels like the path for San Francisco is easier than Baltimore, all things being equal. Now, Philadelphia's had a nice year, but they've fallen off here. Dallas is very beatable on the road when Dallas has been on the road, right? So it's like, yeah, there's some threats. I don't know if it'll be a coronation. I don't know if it'll just be a cakewalk in like an NFC Championship game, but they're going to be real favorites playing at home, no matter who they play.
I think so. Pretty much all the way through the postseason. If they end up locking down that one seed, which they control their own destiny, they win the next two. They have the one seed. I'll tell you the teams that scare me, though. The Los Angeles Rams are playing some of the best football in all of the NFL right now.
You're about to see them, right?
Yeah, and Matthew Stafford's coming back to form. They'll probably need to win that game on the final week of the season against the Niners. The Lions feel like they can put up a ton of points, and if that defense actually gets a little motivation and they play like they're trying to, they really fly around and actually really resemble the San Francisco 49ers defense to me when they choose to. They don't always choose to. So those are two teams out of the NFC that really kind of send a shiver down your spine if you're a 49ers fan, and you might have to end up playing the Rams back to back. Like you might face them twice in a row. And Sean McVay in the postseason, his stats look very different than Sean McVay in the regular season. So it's just all these different scenarios pop up. And I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk, but I do think they should be the heavy favorites to get to the NFC Championship and then to the Super Bowl.
We're going to get to Mike, who's on hold in a second. So, Mike, stay where you are. Before we get to Mike, who wants to talk a little bit San Diego State, Gonzaga. Brock Purdy. You've heard of him.
Once or twice.
Quarterback
Named my dog after him.
Did you?
I did, yeah. Little Brock.
That's crazy. I don't know if I realized that. That's crazy. Has it been decided here? I mean, did he give away the MVP?
Oh, in 5 years, you're going to be again. No, we totally named him after Brock Lesnar.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the real Kendall's had a list of dog names forever. Brock happened to be on there. So we get the dog, and I'm like, that's Brock.
Yeah.
He absolutely played himself out of the MVP. And it sucks that the MVP, and Jay refused this take, and I liked it, so I'm going to steal it. That the MVP's kind of become like the Heisman, where one game can knock you out of it.
Yeah.
Because you look at the entire season that he's put together, he still leads all quarterbacks in most categories,
including QBR.
But and then you ask, do I think he deserves to be the MVP after that game? No, I don't. Yeah. Like I would make a much better argument for Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey, probably in that order, by the way.
Yeah, or of course Lamar Jackson. Just because again, because it goes beyond stats.
But
like
if there's gonna be a year, John, if there was gonna be a year where it's not a quarterback, this is it, because every quarterback has gotten hurt.
I agree with that. All right, let's go to the phones. 877-767-4760 if you want to weigh in.
Man, that's a mouthful.
It is. 877-767-4760. Mike, you're on line 2, and you're on with John and Ben. What's going on, man?
Well, I've been thinking about this game and the build-up, and it reminds me of the time when I went to go see the Aztecs play UCLA at the Wooden Classic.
Okay.
And the Aztecs won. They beat the Bruins. And I never came out of that arena so proud. It was a big game, and the Aztecs came through, and I have confidence that they're going to do it again tonight.
Mike, appreciate it, and Happy New Year to you. I mean, it's absolutely right in front of them. I mean, I'd be very surprised if San Diego State was not in this game. It's just not in their DNA not to be in games. Grand Canyon, not perfect. They were in it. I mean, almost to the point where it was a one-possession game in the final seconds. BYU, again, not perfect. 4 minutes to play. It was like a tie game. And BYU's still like top 3 in the metrics, and Grand Canyon's a really tough place to play. We've talked about it, and Gonzaga's a tough place to play. But I mean, I'd be surprised if San Diego State wasn't in this game late, and then it's like, what do you do in the final 4 or 5 minutes?
Yeah, and I'm really curious to see usage tonight, John, more than anything, because we talked to Dave Velasquez on Wednesday, and I kind of asked him about that because of how many minutes the starters have been playing in these meaningful games where they are close the whole way. And you look at some of these. Jaden Ledie's had games where he's played 34-plus minutes this year.
Yeah.
Lamont Butler, same thing. Micah Parrish, same thing. And I wonder if that's going to be the case tonight, because you got to think in those games that we've seen where the Aztecs will blow a 12-point lead. We saw it against Washington. We saw it against Cal. I think part of that is because of how many minutes these guys are playing. And so if tonight, I wonder if Dutch and Velasquez are a little more conscious of that and maybe try to get some early rest when things are going well to see if you can get a fully loaded second half with all the starters being fresh the entire time. Easier said than done.
It is easier said than done. Now, I think it was Aztec Breakdown that said Lamont Butler was on the floor early tonight, probably about an hour ago, and he had his wrist taped.
Makes me nervous.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure the circumstance as to why, but, obviously he's going to play if he's on the floor an hour before shooting free throws and getting jumpers in. We thought heading in there as healthy as they've been, They've had the better part of 3 weeks off. Remember, they had the 10, 11, 12 days in front of St. Catherine. Then they played 2 times in 3 days. Now they've had 8 more days off. So, like, the last 20 days, they've played like a game or two, and one of those was against St. Catherine, a non-D1. Jane Ledee is fully healthy. We talked to him post-game. He said he's not bothered at all by the elbow. You've had, nicks and bruises, right? Trammell. Butler against St. Catherine went out with like a nosebleed. There's been a lot with the J. Powell situation.
Broken nose.
So there's
I thought Darion's was more serious than it ended up being.
Played.
Thank goodness.
So hopefully they're healthy, because a year ago they used the same starting lineup basically all year. This year there have been some ebb and flow to the team and the bench, and you're going to need a bench in a game like this at altitude and conference with as good as the conference is. And I think the bench is emerging because you have Trammell off the bench. That's a positive. You've got Powell off the bench and what he's meant so far.
Miles
You've got
Heidi.
the emergence of Heidi as well. So, I think the rotation is, 7, 7.5, 8, 8.5. And we'll see if that's the case here tonight.
And then you sprinkle in a little Miles Bird, and that might be the
100%.
half you're talking about. But Miles Bird has the potential to be one of the better players in Aztecs history. If he wants it, it's there for him. He's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the passing. He just needs to put in the work over the next couple of years. But what can you get out of him this year? Well, I think at some point here, you're going to have to find out in a big way. What better way than against a Gonzaga?
Yeah, he's had some big moments recently. I mean, he had some playing time against St. Catherine. He came out against Stanford, hit a couple of threes. The way I recall
instincts
it.
are there, John.
Yeah,
you can tell he has command of the floor. He just almost tries to make the big play look even bigger.
I'll tell you tonight, and Brian Dutcher talked to Mark Ziegler a little bit about this, either in the Trammell Nemhart article, or in his game preview. Graham Ike is a problem.
He's back.
He's back. He was at Wyoming. He's never beaten San Diego State. I think he's 0-4. And he's one of these matchups where, okay, if you got Nathan Mensah and you got a G, you can figure out a way to maybe combat him one-on-one. But the problem is he's a good passing center, and Gonzaga has not shot the three well, but you just don't know. And they're at home, and all of a sudden you double them, and they get looks, and they hit some threes, and you can't double them. And if you don't double them, can you stop him? So that Ledee, Heidi, Saunders dynamic against someone as skilled as Graham Ike is something to keep an eye on tonight.
Now, something Dave Velasquez did mention in our interview with him was that they're starting to look at different ways to get Jaden and Heidi on the floor at the same time. So far, it's been very much exclusive. I would like to see that a lot. You move Jaden to a power four, which I think is his natural fit position, and then you let Miles Heidi come in to mainly defensively play the position, which he's been very good at this year, playing defensive center. I think that gives you a different option, a different look, where you get the height and then you get the power from Jaden Ledee, rather than relying on Jaden Ledee and Elijah Saunders, who have similar body types while they're the same height. You need a little bit taller than Jaden.
And this might be the game where, to your point, you might need Jaden on the floor for close to 40 minutes. I mean, it's just because he's that impactful and he's got this absurd motor where he just doesn't get tired, that maybe there is a scenario where Heidi's on the floor at the same time as Ledee, because, well, if you want Heidi on the floor, you're not taking Jaden off it because you might need him for 38 plus minutes, which is something he's done a lot this year. And it's not like he's been getting worn down. Where, yes, the Aztecs have lost some games. You could argue, well, maybe they got worn down second half against BYU. Wasn't because Jaden got worn down. And when Jaden was less effective against Grand Canyon, well, he had strained his elbow. And he scored like 20-something points in that game in the first 20 minutes. Yeah, he had like 20 points 22 minutes into the game. So it's a big one. It's not an end-all, be-all. The season is not on the line. It's not a must-win game. But I will say this. You win it, it's got weight until March. So the upside's significant. I don't think the downside is nearly as significant, assuming you can keep it relatively close tonight in Spokane.
If it's within 10, I don't think there's a downside at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. So they got to, keep it close.
Except for, emotionally.
Yeah, and you want to win the game, obviously. I mean, it's about more than just metrics. You want to win the game, and hopefully San Diego State will find a way to do that here tonight against Gonzaga. We will have the countdown to tip-off coming up in just a handful of minutes. Myself and Ben Fletcher, we will have storylines for you. We'll take a look at the health of the Aztecs, keys to a San Diego State win. We'll take a look at the top 25 in Mountain West scoreboard. Man, what a year it's been for the Mountain West. Top 4 or 5 teams have lost a combined 6 games. Got all these teams inside the top 30, top 40. The league has gotten 4 teams to the NCAA tournament each of the last 2 years. They seem like they're in a position, and there's so much basketball to be played, but it seems like they're in a position where they could once again get 3, 4, dare I say even more than that, teams to the NCAA tournament in 2024. All right. Everyone, thank you for your support in 2023. It means the world to us. We're back, of course, to kick off 2024 on January 2nd. Really, thank you for your support. Have a safe and enjoyable New Year's. Have a safe and enjoyable New Year's. And again, we got Aztec basketball coming up in about 30 minutes. If you missed anything today, check it out at sportssd.com, iHeartRadio app, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify. Please leave a review if you're listening to us on a podcast platform. Find us on social media at Jon and Jim, JONANDJIM. On the other side, the countdown to tip-off for San Diego State and Gonzaga. For Brent and Fletch, I'm John. Keep it here at San Diego Sports 760. JD Gaucho, before we wrap up this stream, and thank you guys for hanging out. Thank you for the super chat. He says, okay, here's the super chat, guys. Less of Jim, more Brent's back page in 2024, please. I'll see what I can do. Thank you, JD Gaucho. Appreciate you guys. We'll catch up in 2024. Appreciate you guys. Happy New Year. More.